Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 33 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're teaching your Raspberry Pi who's boss. What I'm going to need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee, poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Sunfounder. Sunfounder is actually sponsoring this most excellent series of Raspberry Pi lessons. And in this class, we're using the Sunfounder Raphael Raspberry Pi kit, the Sunfounder Raphael kit. Most of you guys probably already have your gear. If you don't have your gear yet, look down in the description. There is a link over to Amazon where you can pick this kit up. Believe me, your life and my life are going to be easier if we are working on identical hardware. Sunfounder, putting the tech back in TopTechBoy.com. Okay, enough of this shameless advertising. Let's jump in and talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my solution to the homework assignment that I gave you in lesson number 32. And what we've been working on in the last several lessons is we have been working on this most excellent 16-button keypad, and we've been learning how to go in and old school program it and get input from the keypad. So I think in lesson 31, I showed you just kind of at a very basic level how you could read a key. And then in lesson 32, I showed you how you could go in and sort of go across and step through all the keys and sort of figure out which one was being pressed and which ones were not being pressed. And then what your homework assignment for today was, your homework assignment was to create a function, a Python function or a Python class that you could just call that would read a string back of what you had typed in, and you would specify like what you would want your return character to be, like maybe D would be the return character. So if I called the function and put in 1, 2, 3, and then D, then it would return back from that function the characters 1, 2, 3, which I'd input. So it really is going to simplify our ability to work with the keypad. How many of you guys were successful? If you were successful, leave a comment down below. I am legend. If you were not successful, leave a comment down below. I folded up like a cheap Walmart lawn chair. Okay, but never fear, because I'm going to jump in and I'm going to show you how to do this. Now, if you haven't used a keypad before, I don't want to go through all the basics because I've already done 2 lessons on it. You might want to go back and check out the lesson 31 and 32 if you haven't already. But the one thing I will show for you guys that just want to use this is the connections. You've got to think in terms of rows. There's 4 rows and there are 4 columns. Okay, and the way the pinout is starting at the left with the buttons up, this is row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3, and then column 0, column 1, column 2, column 3, and then I just have it hooked up coming down the GPIO pins over here on the inside. The starting at row 0 is connected to pin 11, and then the next one is pin 13, 15, and then down to pin 29. That's row 0 through row 3, and then column 0 through column 3 are connected to pins, GPIO pins 31, 33, 35, and 37. So that's how I have it hooked up. If you guys just want to get to the bottom line and not really understand how all this stuff is working. But let's jump in now and let's see if we can take what we know and let's see if we can build a function based on this keypad. So in the future, we don't have to worry about all of this. We can just jump in and use the keypad. Now, I'm going to be honest with you on something like the keypad, since it's a physical object. I like to create a Python class instead of just a function or a method, and then it just makes it even easier to use. And so this will be a good review of Python classes for you guys who have not done that in a while. And maybe for some of you guys, this will be the first time that you actually create a Python class. So let's create the class The class is going to be what? What is the object? The object is the keypad. So I'm just going to call it keypad, lowercase like that. So that is my overall class. Now, when you do a class, you have to have an init method. Now, remember, a method is the same thing as a function. It's just if you have a function, it's a function. If you put the function inside of a class, now you call the function a method. So I'm going to define this init method because you really need an init method if you're going to use a class. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to define the init method. And to define the init method, it is underscore underscore, and then init, and then underscore underscore, and then these are the parameters. You grab the parameters here within the parentheses that you are going to send to it, okay? And so what you have to understand is when you call a class to create an object, you pass it things, and when you create the object, it goes in and it executes the init. Then after that, you can individually call the different methods that you have. But the first time when you create your object, it executes the init. Well, what I want is I need some information to be passed when I create the object, but I also don't want to have to put them in there. So I'm going to put in the default values, okay? And you always need to pass it self so it knows who it is. So you've got self. And then I'm going to go ahead and set my rows up as an array. And remember, I said I had my rows connected in the way that I have the thing connected over there. My rows were on pins 11, 13, 15, and 29. Okay. Now, why do I do that? I do that so that if I use my default pin out, my default wiring, I don't have to pass this every time. It just does the default. If I'm going to do something different, I would then pass it the parameter when I create the keypad object rows equals, and then I would put in whatever I'm using. But if I don't put something in, it will use this. Then also we're going to have columns, which are equal to, what did I say, 31, 33, 35, 37. These are the defaults. If you don't pass something different in, it will use these. Then also, I want to give it my labels, and so I want to create a 2D matrix where I put what all the labels are on the 16 keys. And so again, this will always be there, and then you can pass it something different if your keypad looks different. But let's come back over here. And so now what I am going to say is I'm going to call that key labels, and the key labels is going to be a 2D array. So I open the array, then I open the first row, and now I'm going to put all these labels in as strings. If you want to change them back to ints later, you can, but I'm just going to put everything as a string. So the first label was the character 1, and then a comma, and then the character 2, and then a comma, and then the character 3, and then a comma, and then the character A. That's the first row. All right. Now I'm going to close the row, and now I'm going to put a comma, and now I'm going to open my next row. And then what is in there? I am going to have a 4, a 5. That's not good. A 5, and then 3, or a 4, 5, a 6. Okay, and then this row ends with a B, like that. Now I'm going to close that row, put a comma, open my next row. What are the labels on the next row? It is a 7, an 8, a 9, and a C, an uppercase C, like that. We're getting this thing built pretty well. I'm going to close that row. I'm going to put a comma. I'm going to open the bottom row, and that is the character asterisk, and then the character 0, and then the character pound, and then the character D. Okay, now be very careful. You have to close the row, and that was the last row. Now I close the matrix like that. Okay, so now those are the defaults. Let's see, I think there's something else I probably need there. Yeah, I also need, let's go back. There's one other variable that I'm going to go ahead and set, and that is the return char. So I'm going to say ret char like that for return character. And this is just saying when you're inputting data, what's like the enter key where you then terminate your input. And I'm going to say the default for that is the uppercase D. And then if we don't want the return character to be D, when you create your object, you can pass ret char equals something else. Okay, but this is just where if I set these up like this, I don't have to pass it any parameters. I can just use the defaults if I want. Okay, that looks pretty good. So we have our init defined there. Now, what do we want to do in the setup when we're creating this keypad object? What are the setup things we're going to want to do? We're going to want to set our pins up. So I'm going to import rp_i.gpio as GPIO. Okay. And then I need to get these variables that I'm passing in when I'm creating the object. I need to make them generally available in the class. And then how I do that. So let's see. This is a little bit strange. Let me make sure that I close that out. Yeah, I didn't close. I closed it with a bracket instead of closing it with a parenthesis. Okay, make sure you fix that. Okay, so now import rpi.gpio as GPIO. And then what I'm going to want to do is, for some reason, it is still not happy. So I have an error in here, because it is acting a little strange. So I've got the comma, now key labels is open 1 2 3 4a, close, open 4 5 6 b, close, comma, open 7 8 9 c, comma, star 0 pound D. All right, and then okay, so this is what I did. I closed the row, right? I closed the row, but I still need to close the matrix. All right, now the comma, and now the new parameter is ret char of D, and now I close the init. So this time, yeah, I think it should be happy. And then the one thing I did forget is that it is a method or a function, so you need to put the colon there. All right, so now I come down here. Now it looks like things are happy, so let me just get that in the right spot. Okay, so now we're going to import the rpi.gpio as GPIO. Now I need to make all of these variables up here generally available to the other methods in this class. And so I'm going to do that by just making it self.rows is equal to rows, and then self.columns is going to be equal to columns, and then self.return char is just going to be return char like that, and now self.key labels is going to be equal to key labels, which I get from up there. And so now all these should be generally available. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a GPIO.set mode, and I'm going to set it as GPIO.board because I'm using the board numbering scheme. And now what I need to do is I need to go in, and in this init, what I want to do in my init is I want to set up the 4 input pins, and the 4 output pins. The 4 output pins are the rows, and the 4 input pins are the columns. And so the easiest way to do that, I think the easiest way to do that is to just create a very simple little for loop. So I'm going to say for I in rows. Does it know what rows is? Yes, it knows what rows is. From up here, it knows what rows is in up here. So for I in rows, okay, for I in rows, what do I want to do? I want to do a GPIO dot set up, and then what do I want to do? I want to set up pin I. That'll step through 11, 13, 15, and 29, and I want to make it GPIO dot out like that. Okay. Now, similarly, I want to go for J in columns, and notice I just step through the rows and then exit that loop, and then I step through the columns. The columns isn't inside the row loop, and so make sure that you see that. So now for J in columns, I'm going to say GPIO dot set up, and then what do I want to do? Pin J, and then GPIO dot in, and then remember we don't want to have to put all those resistors in the circuit, so what we're going to do is we're going to activate our pull down resistors, and we do that with the comma pull underscore up underscore down is equal to GPIO dot pull up down underscore down, like that. So that should set up all those pull down resistors. That looks good. Okay, man, I just want to kind of run this just to see if I could do it. So I think what I would need to do just to run this, it's not going to do anything, but I just want to make sure that it doesn't crash. And so what I believe that I would do here is I would just come down here, and I'm going to go ahead in my main program, I'm going to go ahead and import rpi.gpio as GPIO, and then I am going to say, I'm going to create the object my pad is equal to keypad the class. So I'm creating an object, my pad, which is of the class keypad, and I'm just going to use the default parameters, and so I'm going to go like that. I'm just going to do that, and then I think that I am just going to then just do a GPIO dot clean up so that I release those pins. And I just want to see if I have any gross errors in there. So let's just go ahead and run this and see what happens. Okay, key labels is not defined. Did I self.key labels, label, how do you spell labels? This is crazy. Label, L-A-B-E-L-S. And so this one should be E-L-S, okay? See why it's good to run the program? Okay, so you see now I didn't get an error, so at least I know that I'm in pretty good shape right now. So I have the keypad object created and initialized, and now we're ready to come in and actually do something. So after we set it up, then what would we want to do? We would want to read from it. So I'm going to create another function, which is a method because it's inside of a class. So I'm going to create the method, define it, and it's going to be read keypad, because what do we want to do? We want to set up the keypad, and then we want to be able to read the keypad. So I'm going to define read the keypad, and then all I'm going to pass to it is just self, so it knows who it is. Go back and watch my most excellent tutorial on classes, methods, and functions if you're getting lost with what I'm talking about. Hopefully for most of you this will be review. So what is this method going to do? Well, I'm going to have to do some work, so I better go ahead and say from time import sleep. And then I think in a minute you'll see what I'm going to do, but I'm going to go ahead and import again rpi.gpio as GPIO. because I'm not sure that this, when I save this later, we're going to actually make a library. And I'm not sure when we put this in a library whether this method would inherit the library from the init. So I'm going to go ahead and import it again just to be safe. So now I've imported RPI .GPIO as GPIO. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a variable keystrokes, and that's going to be a string, but I'm just going to make it an empty string. So I'm at least just initializing the variable that it is an empty string, if that makes sense. Okay, then we're going to come down here, and now I need to set up those variables. So as we're fixing to go in and read all the keys, as we're getting ready, nothing has been pressed. So I'm going to create a variable no press is equal to true. Okay, because nothing's been pressed. And then no press old is also equal to true because nothing's been pressed the last time, because this is the first time. So basically nothing on the keypad has been pressed. And these are those little breadcrumbs we're going to have to drop later. So we've got to kind of go ahead and set those things up. All right, now that we have those things set up, I think we are ready to begin looping. So I'm just going to say while true, and this will just allow me to be looping through and reading each one of those keys, seeing whether it has been pressed or not. All right, and now again, each time we start the loop, when we start the loop, we have to reset what? No press, because right when we start, nothing has been pressed. We're going to set that as true again. Now we're going to step through the rows. So I'm going to say for my row in, what are our rows? It is 0, row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3. So I'm going to step through those rows like that. All right. Now, after as I'm stepping through the rows, I also want to step through the columns. So I'm going to say for my column in, similarly, column 0, column 1, column 2, column 3. So do you see this is going to let me step through all 16 keys? Okay, it's going to let me step through all 16 keys like that. Now, what do I want to actually do? Well, to do a read, what do I need to do? I need to do a row select by setting the row high. So I'm going to do a GPIO.output, and then my rows are self.rows, right? Because that's what I set them as. Rows come in from up here, and then I set self.rows to that rows, and down here, what this method is going to know is it's going to know about self.rows. And then what is the row? Well, it's my row. That's the one that we are going to put high, and then we're going to put it GPIO.high like that. Okay, now what do we need to do? Now we need to read the column. So but value for button value is equal to GPIO.input. Okay, remember we read from the columns, and this time it is self.columns of what? My, get that bracket in there, my column. I need to put some returns in here, make sure you guys can see what I'm doing. It doesn't get behind my head. So I'm going to do self.columns of my column. That's the column that we're going to read from. And then we just close that. So now I have a button value. And now what I've got to do is I've got to go ahead and now set that row back down. So GPIO.output, I've got to deselect the row. So it's self.rows, my row, and then GPIO.low. So now I'm deselecting the row. So in order to read something, what I do is I'm stepping through the rows, I'm stepping through the columns. I set the row high, I read the first column, I set that row low. Then I set the row high, I read the next column, I set the row low. And so I just go through and stepping through the rows and columns, I will read each one of the 16 buttons. I hope that makes sense. I really think it should make sense. So now what do we do? Well, let's see, was anything pressed? So I'm going to say if the button value, if button value equal 1, that means something was pressed, okay? Then what do I do? Well, I need to get the character associated with it. So my char, the character that was pressed is going to be equal to self.keyLabels, like that of my row and my column. Why am I not doing a lot of explaining? Because this is the same code that I did last week. So if you watched last week's lesson, this is a review. If you want to understand this, go back and watch last week. But for you guys that watched last week, this will be review. So you see, something was pressed because button value is 1. Well, what was pressed? Well, what row were we on? What column were we on? That's the button. And then what we do here is we go in and we see what was the label. What was the label? So it's key.labels of my row and my column. Now I should know what it is, okay? And so I've got that my char, but now what I want to see is if my char equal self dot what? Return char. Then what I will do is I will return keystrokes. Now this doesn't make a lot of sense to you right now because we haven't gone all the way through and built my keystrokes, but my keystrokes is the string that we're building of what we're inputting. And then if it sees the return char, right, which I set as a default as D, if it sees that D, then it jumps out and it leaves the method and it leaves the class and it goes back to the main program. So it would return keystrokes, even though we don't really have anything in keystrokes yet. We would return it because before we hit the end character, we would put some stuff in there. Okay, now what we need to say is at this point, if button value equals 1, then I've got to say, well, no press is equal to false, okay? Because if button value is 1, there was a key press. So we've got to drop the breadcrumb. Yes, we did read something, okay? Then what we're going to say is also if button value equal 1, that means the button was pressed, and no press old equal true. That means last time through, nothing was pressed, and that is addressing the sticky finger problem that if you hold it down, you don't want it to keep reading the same thing. So you're only reading the character, you're only putting that character onto your string if you had taken your button off the finger, so you won't get a repeat here. Go back and watch last week's video if that doesn't make sense. So no press old is equal true, and no press equal false, which means last time through no button was pressed, but this time through a button was pressed. And if all three of those things are in fact correct, then we're going to build keystrokes. So keystrokes is going to be equal to keystrokes, which is an empty string, and this plus means concatenate with my char. So I'm just adding each character onto the string. Remember, plus for this is concatenate. Ooh, you might not have been able to see something back there, so you can just see, you can look at that line there that might have temporarily been behind my head. Sorry about that. Guys, we're almost done here. We are almost done. So keystrokes is equal to keystrokes plus my char. And now with that, what I need to do is I need to back out before the if statement. And so this would be, I think I need to back out all the way. under the 4. Okay, I think it's under this first 4. And then what I need to do is I need to say, so I've gone through the rows, I've gone through the columns, and then I need to say no press old is equal to no press. And so now I remember what happened. Next time through the loop, I remember what happened this time through the loop. Was a button pressed or not? No press, like that. Okay, then I just need to do a sleep of, let's say 0.25, so I'm not just sitting there hammering this thing too hard. I give it a little bit of a delay in there. Okay, so now that is the class and that is the method. And now I'm going to get rid of some of these blank lines I put in there. Sorry about this. Okay, so let me just kind of look at my indentation. That's lining up, and then this is lining up under this, and then this is under the class. Okay, so now what would I do here? When I say my pad is equal to keypad, I'm creating an object. That object is my pad. It's based on the class keypad. Okay, and when that goes up there, and I do this, it calls keypad and it runs this setup. It runs the init. But now if I actually want to do something, what do I need to do? I need to call this method read keypad. Well, how would I do that? What is my object called? The object that I created. The object that I created is my keypad. And then what I could do is I could say my string, so this is going to read the string, so I'm going to say my string is equal to my object, my pad, and then what do I want to call the read keypad method that's inside of keypad, the class. All right, let's live dangerously and let's go ahead and see if we can print my string. How many mistakes did I make in here? How many of you guys are screaming at me for all the mistakes that I made in there? Okay, so the main program is going to import RPI GPIO as GPIO. It's going to create an object myPad based on the class keypad. Then it's going to call the method read keypad from my object myKeypad, and it's going to put the result that is returned. Right, that's where this return magic happened. I'm going to return keystrokes and it's going to go into my string here. And then I'm going to print my string. So let's just run it and not get too excited because it's probably going to. Well, interesting, it didn't crash, but I'm wondering, let me press a key. So let's come over here and let you watch the excitement. Okay, so let's say that I press a 1 and I press a 2 and then I press the D. Shazam! Look at that. Okay, I got a 12 pack. Okay, guys, look at this. Look at this. This is really exciting. Now watch this, okay? So what I could do is I could put in the number 8533362 and then D. Oh, yeah, okay. I don't have this. Let's see. I need to run the program again. I don't have the actual program down here in a loop. So let me go ahead and run it. That's okay. You can put it in a loop, right? That's simple enough. And so now I could say 8533362 and then D to return. Boom, 8533362. Who's your huckleberry? Look at that. I love this. Do you guys get as excited about something like this as I do? Do you see now this is really like a practical input device. This is a practical input device that you could make your Raspberry Pi go mobile now because you could sit here and you could interact with it through the keypad because we have this really slick method here that we can use. Okay, well, let's play around with this a little bit. And so let's come back over here to decode view. And back over here at the code view, what you can see again, if you want it to keep running, you could put this whole thing down here. Like after you do the import and create the object, then what you could do here is you could put a try and except and a while loop and all that stuff that we normally do. But I'm not going to fool with that right now because I want to get to something else. What if we wanted to change the return character, the character that means enter? Where would we do that? Well, we wouldn't do it here. We would do it when we create the object, because when we create the object, we want to give it the parameters. And so what I would need to do here is I would need to send it a return char. Okay, now it's going to use D if I don't send anything to it, but in this init, if I send it return char, then what's it going to do? It is going to use that as the return char. And so here I'm going to say the return char is going to be equal to, let's make it A. Okay, like that. Now let's come in and let's run it. Okay, and so let's just say I say 8. Oops, let me get back over here where you can see what I'm doing. So I typed in an 809 and then a D, and look at that. You see it didn't come back. Why? D is not your return char. What's your return char? It's an A. And now I have 809D because now it treated D just like anything else that you might want to do. I'll tell you. We are B. I can't do that because it'll return. I was going to try to type it. We're bad. Okay. But we would have to put in a different return char to do that. But anyway, I digress. So do you see how powerful this is? Now, as you move forward in wanting to incorporate the keypad, all you need is a few lines of code because you can what? You can call this class. And you can get everything you want without having to always memorize. You see, we got just a few lines of code here. And then all you got to do is just call this class. And now you don't have to sit and remember all this nonsense of how the keypad works. You just use the class. Now, what is the one way? Somebody tell me the one way that we could make this even better, even more transparent, even simpler to use. Somebody? Anybody? I'm listening. What would be the thing that we could do? Okay, what we could do is we could make this a library. Okay, so now watch this. What I am going to do is I'm going to come and I'm going to just copy this stuff because I might need it later. I'm going to cut it. And now I am going to save this. I'm going to save this, save as, I'm going to save it as kplib.py. kplib for KP. How about KB? KB for keyboard, keyboard lib. And I'm going to save it. Okay, guys, now to do a library, the really right way to do the library is to save the library in your default Python installation, but I don't want to spend 45 minutes trying to sort through where that might be for you. And so if you just save the library in the same folder of the program that calls the library, that's the easy way to do it. And then you can go back and watch my old videos if you want to do it really the sophisticated or the elegant way. So now all of a sudden, kblib is a library, okay? And so now I'm going to create a new program, okay? And now I'm going to save my new program, and I'm going to save it as keyread.py, like that. So this is a new program. And then what am I going to do? Well, I am going to import RPI GPIO as GPIO, and then I'm going to say from kblib just like that. That's what I created. You don't need to put the .py. From kblib import, what do we want to import? We want to import the class Keypad. So that's what I need to do. I need to say from kblib import Keypad. And then I can say my keypad is this. I've still got the A there. And then my string in that. So now let's run that and see what happens. Didn't crash. Could be a good sign. Okay, so let's come over here and let's say 89. And then I think I had A. Boom! Who's the magic man? Look at that. Okay, do you see, guys, do you see the power of this? Look at this. I can say 8533362 and enter. Forgot to run the program again. You guys are going to get tired of me doing that. I just don't want to set up that darn try and accept thing. So let's go 8533362 and A, and boom, there it is. So do you see now, anytime you want to use this keypad, all you got to do is just remember how to hook it up. And you can also, if you hook up to different GPIO pins, if you're hooking up to different GPIO pins, you could just say, what's your rows here? And you could put them in and you could do that. And then you could hook it up however you wanted by passing the parameters to the class, and then you have a lot of flexibility in what you could do. Man, I think that this is just very, very powerful, and I'm very, very pleased with what we've been able to accomplish. And now I'm kind of excited to be able to think about that we could use this keypad, and we could use the keypad, and we could use the LCD display, and then we could plug this Raspberry Pi into a USB power bank, and we could go mobile, right? We could go mobile, and we could have a mobile application. And then also, if you think, you guys that are taking my Fusion 360 classes, you guys that are taking my Fusion 360 class, you could even then imagine printing a 3D case and then having a portable unit that could do something useful. Well, what useful thing could you do? Well, we've got a box full of components here, right? We've done temperature sensors, we've done pressure sensors, we've done all types of different things. And so you've got this toolbox, and now with the keypad, you could incorporate a lot of different things together to have sort of a standalone prototype that you don't have to be kind of tethered down to your desktop, and you could go out and do some pretty interesting things. I was going to give a homework. I think we'll just move on to some other components. What I wanted to do for a homework, what I wanted to do was I wanted to have you create with the LCD display something that would be a hexadecimal converter, where you could put a number in hexadecimal and then it would convert it to digital. But then the reason that doesn't work, it doesn't work because you would need an E and an F on the keyboard. So there's not enough keys on the keyboard to do a hex converter, really. But I thought that would be kind of a neat project. But what we'll do is we'll probably move on to some other components, and then we'll come back later and we'll revisit connecting the keypad and the LCD display and doing some really interesting stuff. Guys, I hope you're having as much fun taking this class as taking these lessons as I am making the lessons. I am just really, really excited about where we've gotten so far in the lessons. We're really working our way through these components. And like I said, I'm excited to get to the camera, but I really want to get the foundation built before we go in and start playing with the camera. You'll have a lot of fun with that. Hopefully you're already having a lot of fun. Okay, guys, if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. Make sure to leave a comment down below, because that helps me with the old YouTube juice. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. And then make sure that you share these videos with other people. Get more people into this hobby, because the world needs more people doing engineering and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.